Hello again, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us here on StarTelegram.com for Cowboys Overtime. I am Fort Worth Star-Telegram columnist Mac Engel. That beautiful gentleman on the other side of your screen is Mr. Cowboys Know-It-All, Nick Harris, sporting the Butler sweatshirt.
Go Dogs.
Go Dogs indeed. Not necessarily. How was your bracket going, Nick?
It started off really strong. First round, 30 for 32 was moving. I was in like the top 3,000 on the ESPN brackets of like 24 million. I was like, man,
no kidding.
I'm going to be onto something here. And then second round didn't go so well. So we'll just leave it at that.
Okay, that's enough. That's enough. Well, for those who are interested, we are changing Cowboys Overtime a little bit. We're going to play with the format a little bit here in the off season. So hopefully by the time the regular season rolls around, we'll look as good as the Cowboys do. All right, let's get into what has been, I would say, surprisingly a busier offseason than I expected for the Cowboys. Guys coming in, guys going out. So let's get to it.
Right.
Free agency has begun in this NFL offseason. How would you say? Before I ask you the question, Nick, I'm going to go over some names here of people who have come and gone. The Cowboys have kept their punter, which is pretty big. They have kept punter Brian Enger. They kept return specialist Cavante Turpin, gave him a 3-year contract. Also gave special teamer CJ Goodwin a deal, guard Brock Hoffman a deal, and the big one, defensive tackle Osa Odighizuwa was given a hefty contract extension to stick around as opposed to go to free agency. Nick, obviously they lost some other ones. The running back Rico Dowdle left because they signed Javonte Williams to a contract, he of the Denver Broncos, and they lost Tank Lawrence. Anybody else in these comings and goings that I'm missing in this free agency period so far?
Yeah, nothing that comes off the top of my mind. Did you mention Israel Mukwamu coming back? He'll be back into the fold. I think that we'll get into that. That's going to be similar.
I missed that. Well, I missed that one because I couldn't say his last name.
Okay. Well, there you go. But yeah, there's certainly some notable ones here.
Okay. So a year ago, the Cowboys did nothing, right? I would say they did about as close to nothing as a team could possibly do. This season, this offseason, it seems like they have done just a little bit more. I want to make one quick amendment to that. They did say goodbye to both backup quarterbacks. Cooper Rush signed a 2-year deal with the Baltimore Ravens, and Trey Lance cemented his status as the worst trade in the history of the Dallas Cowboys under Jerry Jones. So right now they don't have any backup quarterback. So both of those guys are gone. Would you say that they have been busier this offseason than they were at this point a year ago?
Oh, certainly, 100%. At this point a year ago, I believe they only had one signing in the bag, and it was Eric Kendricks. And then they eventually did sign running back Royce Freeman as well. And those were the two outside signings before they got to training camp. So, yeah, it's certainly more. And they've signed 10 guys from the outside going in to this offseason. And you talk about the guys that they have returned as well. Osa Odighizuwa, giving him a contract. That is not something they would have done for a Tyron Smith or any of the guys who would have departed last offseason. But you do see DeMarcus Lawrence depart. I think you could probably speak a little bit more on this too, Mac, in the sense that we were probably sensing that he was gone. I think the door was open for a return, but in the end, it ended up being more money and a better opportunity in Seattle for DeMarcus Lawrence, and they filled that room with a lot of edges in a quick time span to where he's no longer leaving a hole.
So he obviously missed most of last season with a leg injury. And when I talked to him, he was at a promotional event at an HEB, I guess it was last month, and he and I spoke very briefly, and I don't want to mischaracterize the conversation. It was some lengthy, hour-long sit-down. It was a very brief exchange. But it did seem to me, Nick, that if they were going to keep any veteran guy, there was a real opportunity here. But my impression, the way it played out, is that I don't think they were ever going to keep him. Do you? Under any circumstance, do you?
I think if the price had come down, maybe. I think having a veteran in that room is certainly something they would have liked to have, especially a guy that's had experience, but they were not going to go over the top and pay a price for DeMarcus Lawrence coming off the Lisfranc injury that he had this past year and missed 12 games. So I think if the price had come down, we would maybe start talking about it like a week from now. Like, hey, DeMarcus Lawrence is still on the market. Maybe his price come down. This might make more sense. But I think in that initial wave of free agency, if you had told me, hey, he's going to sign somewhere, I would have been like, okay, it's not going to be in Dallas.
Okay, so who replaces him? Well, and let's just – they have done this before, and NFL teams make these decisions all the time. With the guy who's on the wrong side of 30, they say, we love you, but good luck elsewhere. And usually I think it works out, usually. Not all the time, but usually. This is one where it feels like it's more of a toss-up. Who replaces – I don't mean the guy who replaces the older guy who may get hurt. Who replaces the best version of Tank Lawrence on the team now?
I think eventually you're looking at Marshawn Kneeland, the second-round rookie out of Western Michigan from last season, a rookie last year. I don't think he's going to step in and be that immediately. He battled injury himself last year, dealt with a knee sprain, was on the IR for a little bit, was never really 100% healthy after that. I believe that happened in the Pittsburgh game where he had that knee sprain. But they drafted him in the second round with the idea that he would eventually be DeMarcus Lawrence's replacement. And while he didn't get a full rookie season to really show that, I think off-season development and getting him ready for year two could certainly help. But in the meantime, they did sign two bodies at the edge spot to help kind of bridge that gap. One of them being Dante Fowler, bringing him back after a one-year hiatus in Washington, where he exploded for 10.5 sacks, and he had multiple tackles for loss, generated 39 quarterback pressures. I mean, he's going to be a guy that will be able to step in and provide immediate help to the pass rush. Now, he doesn't really bring you what DeMarcus Lawrence brought you in the run game, but they made another addition in bringing in Peyton Turner, who they think can step in and be that. Now, Peyton Turner was a first-round pick back in 2021. He never played a full season until last year. Finally was able to get onto the field and play 17 games last year. He's battled a ton of injuries, but he has had his best football in 2024. And the idea from the Cowboys is that he can keep that health going, and they think they can bring back that first-round upside. I think it's more of a project. I think it's more of a little bit of wishful thinking. But if it works out for the Cowboys, then they look like geniuses, and they have a guy who was a former first-round pick who's finally healthy and playing at his best.
There's one other significant departure, and I wasn't crazy about this one. The Tank one I understood, and the Tank one I always thought was a huge risk to bring him back just because of his injury history. Yeah. And he's had some major injuries. Now, he's come back and played really, really well. And I'm giving you an indication that he was slowing down. But eventually, you and I both know it just happens. And sometimes they can be doing this and then boom. But the one that they didn't bring back that I was like, I'm not feeling that, was Jordan Lewis. And Jordan Lewis was a great pro, came back from injury, really played well last season. I thought he should have been a Pro Bowler. But they let him go in free agency, signed a deal in Jacksonville. Great for him, great guy, great locker room prep. All pluses. Mm-hmm. This is the one where I'm feeling like, I don't know about that one. What about you?
Yeah, this one hurts, and it hurt the Cowboys too. I think it caught them off guard. They were
caught them off guard that somebody gave him the bag.
Yes, and he's one of the most underrated players in the NFL. I said that at the end of the year last year. He's truly one of the best nickel corners, and he gets no respect for it. This is a guy who was one of the two bright spots on the defense last year consistently. But I would also say that he was probably the only one, because the other one I'm thinking of is DeMarvion Overshown. But he eventually ended up missing time with injury as well. So you're talking about a guy who played all games last year, provided an impact, and played his best football, I believe, in his 8 seasons last year. I'm looking at Jordan Lewis, and it was surprising to me. And I think it was surprising to the Cowboys that he got $10 million per year. And at the time of the signing, it was the richest deal for a nickel cornerback in the league from an annual per year perspective. It eventually got overtaken. But the Jaguars, they identified Jordan Lewis. They saw him as a talent, and they brought him in, and they gave him a bag that he was more than deserving of. The Cowboys wanted to bring him back. As soon as they signed that deal with Osa Digizua, their focus shifted to bringing back Jordan Lewis and trying to get a deal done for him. I had heard in Indianapolis about a week before all of this went down that there was a, quote, 1,000% chance that Jordan Lewis was not going to be back in Dallas. And I was like, I don't know if I believe that. Check with a couple team sources. They're like, no, he's a top priority. Well, that ended up being the case, and he went to Jacksonville and took a pretty big bag.
You know, the thing that amazes me is, especially for an ownership group that has that has owned the Cowboys as long as they have, and they have seen since, I would guess, about 10 to 15 years ago, when free agency money started to get crazy. Why would anybody at this point underestimate the value, the price tag on a free agent for a guy who has shown to be pretty good, whether it's in baseball, basketball, or football? Hockey a little bit less so. But at this point, I'm like, how do you not see this coming? That the owners can't help themselves. There's salary cap room on half the league at least to go out and do this. Nick, how does it keep happening when they're like, well, he won't get that? The hell he won't. Yes, he will. They all do.
Yeah, and I think there might be a little bit of grace you could give the Cowboys and Jordan Lewis's perspective, in the sense that he's on the wrong side of 30, or he will be on the wrong side of 30 going into next season. And he had re-signed to one-year deals over the course of the last couple of years for basically the veteran minimum. I mean, this blew all that out of the water. And so you sign that guy to those contracts, and you're like, okay, he didn't get Pro Bowl consideration. We still kind of have him under the radar, blah, blah, blah. But then Jacksonville does a really good job. Shout out to their pro scouting department. That's why you have that department, so that they can identify talents like this and go get them in free agency.
I'm happy for him. You know,
I am too.
He's a terrific guy. He came back from a heart injury a couple of years ago, the knee injury, and he's been a terrific pro. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for guys who last 8, 9 seasons, and especially because he never got the monster contract really until now. So for him to get it now, I'm thrilled for him. All right, let's move on. Let's go over what will be the biggest story on the NFL offseason, and that is the NFL draft, a little bit more than a month away. The Dallas Cowboys have the 12th overall pick. Now, when I look at these mock drafts, consistently, these are the names that I see in the top 5, 3, whatever. Cam Ward, my good friend. Cam Ward, the Miami quarterback, going number 1 to Tennessee. Travis Hunter, the wide receiver defensive back, going 2 to Cleveland. And then his good friend Shedeur Sanders, the Colorado quarterback, would go number 3 to the Giants. After that, it's a combination of Abdul Carter, the Penn State defensive end, big fan, Boise State running back Ashton Gianti, Michigan defenders Mason Graham, Will Johnson, Georgia defensive end Michael Williams. I'm a fan of his. And then the latest mock draft I saw has the Dallas Cowboys, and I need your help here, Nick, selecting the Arizona wide receiver. I don't know. I can't pronounce his name.
I think you can do it. Just try.
Okay. That's awful. You're just waiting to humiliate me. I kind of respect that.
No, I think you can do this one. I really do.
I can get the last one. Tatoria McMillan.
Tetaroa.
Pretty close.
Yeah,
do you think that? Okay.
What did you say? That Tetaroa? I think I like that more, actually.
Thank you. Well, yeah. I'm correcting it for him. It took me forever to get Osa Odigizua correct. Yeah. I had to sit down on my desk. I literally was going over it. Osa Odigizua. I got that finally. Let's just go with Tetris McMillan. Do you think that's realistic at 12?
Yes, I do. When I came out of the combine last month, there were 2 names that I heard more and more throughout the week as being tied to the Cowboys potentially in the first round. Tetaroa McMillan was one, and Michael Williams was the other, the defender from Georgia that you mentioned. Now, that's in addition to guys like Ashton Genty, guys like Matthew Golden, who has been pitched at 12 for the Cowboys as well. If you were asking me to make a prediction today, and I put out a mock draft on Star Telegram last week, I would say it's probably Tetaroa McMillan. The question that you would have for the Cowboys is, would he be there at 12? Right. He's most likely going to be the first receiver taken off the board.
He's ahead of Luther Burden from Missouri, and he's ahead of Matthew Golden at Texas.
Yeah, and it certainly could be Burden, or it certainly could be Golden. I think Golden probably has a much better chance than Burden. But who's to say that Vegas doesn't swing and take him at 6, or New Orleans swings and takes him at 9? I believe they have that pick, and they don't get a chance to take Tetaroa McMillan. That could certainly be a scenario. There's been 2 drafts since 2020 that have seen a receiver go 12 or later. You look back to when Henry Ruggs got selected number 12th overall to the Raiders. I believe that was 2022, that was 2020. And then you also had Jackson Smith-Njigba, who went number 20 overall to the Seattle Seahawks a couple years back.
How did he fall that far?
Yeah, wild.
And that's worse than the CeeDee Lamb one.
Yeah. Yeah, it's insane. And that was the first receiver taken off the board in that draft. That was in 23. But you're looking at a situation where this is not the strongest receiver class by any means. And Teteroa McMillan is a first-round talent. I think any draft expert would tell you that. I would tell you that. He's just probably not a guy who could get selected in the top 10 because there are bona fide top 10 guys. You mentioned them. You talk about Travis Hunter, the quarterbacks, Mason Graham, Jalen Walker is another one out of Georgia who could very well be in that top 10. Tyler Warren, the tight end out of Penn State. But if you're asking me today, I think number 12, Teteroa McMillan. But I think there's going to be probably 5 or 6 options on that board.
Okay. Keeping in line with the draft, give me your top 3 needs for the Cowboys.
No particular order.
No. I need an order on this one because it leads to my next question. Give me an order on it.
I'm gonna go number 1 receiver, number 2 corner, number 3 running back.
Okay. So with the talent that's available and been graded, and typically in my experience covering the draft, NFL teams usually circle about 15 to 17, maybe 20 guys with a legit first round grade.
Yeah.
And everybody else is a 2, 3-ish in that category.
And if I could really quick, this draft class is ranging from about 10 to 15. Like there's not many.
That's a small number.
Yeah.
So of those needs that you listed, which one lines up with the deepest, best, most talented position in those 10 to 15 players?
It would be receiver. I think
because what you're telling me, and the reason I say this, what you're telling me is that Teteroa may be a bit of a reach at 12. Is he?
I wouldn't say he's a reach. No, I would not. If he's there at 12, I think you run the card to the table. Right. He's a big possession guy, and especially for this offense and what they need a big possession guy. They need his 6'4" frame on the outside to jump up and go grab balls over guys. He was the number 1 volleyball player in the country coming out of Anaheim Servite a few years back. This guy,
you know that.
I covered his recruitment
stuff about draft guy. When you knew the guy from Princeton. Like we got the game on last sometime in the fall, and there's a Bengals game on. Some guy, I don't even know who he is.
Andre Yotibash.
Yeah, you're like, oh, I like this guy. I'm like, who the hell is he? He's like, oh, he's out of Princeton. I'm like, dude, you know players coming out of Princeton. Like, what is wrong with you? Like, I love the draft, man. I guess. So if this guy's a great volleyball player, which is great. So now they can get maybe a pro beach volleyball team at halftime or something, and Teteroa can go out there and kick ass. My concern for him, if they plug him in, let's say they pick him, can he do it? Because he's gonna be ahead of everybody else on that team other than CD.
Yeah, I think he could certainly do it. He's a guy you could trust in the red zone, throw it up to him, and he can certainly bring it down. And they need that type of threat. You look back at red zone efficiency last year, and they couldn't do anything in the red zone because they don't have a red zone weapon. There were times early in CeeDee Lamb's career where they would throw it up to him in the end zone. But can you think of one time that they actually threw it up to him, jump ball situation?
No, Nick, the last guy that I thought that they could really throw a ball up to and go get it was Dez Bryant. I mean, CD's a terrific guy. He's a super good receiver. Amari Cooper was not a jump up and go get a guy. Michael Gallup a little bit could go up and get it.
I'll give you that. Yeah,
Michael could. Not like Dez. That was Dez's thing. Whatever they call him 50-50 balls, I would have given him, he would have won those 80% of the time, maybe more than that. And are you telling me that this guy, and I saw him play, he played against TCU back in November in front of like 8 people. He was awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, he was fantastic, but that's a college game. And sometimes you know how it goes. You see these guys who look bigger than life in college, and then you put them on an NFL field surrounded by other NFL players. You're like, ooh, I didn't know that's how this was going to look.
Yeah.
How's that going to look?
And I'll give you a couple of concerns about Teteroa McMillan because I think there's cons to every single draft prospect. He's had the same quarterback since the freshman year in high school. How does that translate whenever he gets into the NFL level? Another knock that he's had is his speed. Can he be this burner who can have yards after the catch, or is he just a guy that you have to throw it up to downfield? Granted, he did run a 4.5 in that range at his pro day last week. Mm-hmm. I don't have concerns about the speed. I think some of those concerns kind of went down. There's more about, his flexibility. Can he run an NFL route tree? I think he can, but there are concerns that present in that. I think the biggest concern would be he's had the same guy throwing him the football since he was a freshman in high school. Could go even further back than that if they grew up together in Anaheim. How does that kind of switch for him when he gets to the NFL level? Are there things that like he hasn't had to do since he was 13 years old with a new quarterback that he's going to have to kind of relearn at 22? How does that factor in? I still think he's a guy you take at 12. You talk about Des Bryant being that 80-20 guy. I think Royal McMillan is that 80-20 guy. Athleticism off the charts, vertical off the charts. He's a guy you take at 12 if he's available.
Okay, what players realistically? When I say realistically, Travis Hunter's not going to be there. I don't think Abdul Carter's going to be there. If he was, I would be like, okay, everybody out of the way. But what player realistically, Nick, do you think if he's there? Like the way the Cowboys felt about CeeDee Lamb. They didn't think CeeDee Lamb was going to be there when he was. I guess that was in 20.
Yeah.
I guess it was in 20 when they picked him in the first round. Nobody thought he was going to be there. So they canceled all plans like, that's the guy. Yep. What player do you realistically think would fall to 12 and you would say, screw it, that's the guy, go get him?
Man.
Because there's some names here like Josh Simmons. I think he's the Ohio State tackle. You said, well, that's a good player. I don't think they would make that pick because of Tyler Guyton.
Yeah, I think Josh Simmons maybe slips into the 20s. He's coming off a knee injury.
Okay.
I think if that could be a trade back scenario though, and I would love to talk trade back scenarios if we could after this. Yep. But Ashton Jeanty is the name that comes to mind because throughout the entire season, throughout the entire bowl season, Ashton Jeanty's getting mocked to the Cowboys over and over and over and over. I go to the winter league meetings here in Las Colinas in December, talk to a couple of senior scouting personnel, and like, yeah, they're taking Jeanty. They're taking Jeanty. We're not like that's a foregone conclusion. Well, now it's starting to become a situation is like Jeanty is most likely not going to be there for you at 12. You got the Las Vegas Raiders who have figured out their quarterback situation, at least for the short term. They don't need to go get a quarterback at 6. They really need a running back. I mean, they had the worst backfield potentially in NFL history last year. They could go get Ashton Jeanty and immediately pair him with Geno Smith. They're a contender. You look at the Chicago Bears. They just revamped that entire offensive line to protect Caleb Williams. They want to help Caleb out even more. Go get Ashton Jeanty. He's a home run hitter who could help you out in the run game. And there's a few teams. You could even make the case for the Jets. I know that they have a crowded room, but if you're looking for a guy who would pair really well with Justin Fields, that's another guy. So you'd be lucky if Ashton Jeanty is there for you at 12. However, I'd be curious to know whenever the staff really gets a handle on all of the prospects in this draft class and are really able to evaluate them, what do they think about taking a running back at 12? And if it's a situation where like, hey, it has to be the number one guy clear and beyond a question, then I wonder if that guy is Ashton Jeanty. But if he's there at 12, if you're asking me, I'm running to the board. I don't care who's there. And I'm taking Ashton Jeanty for this team.
Okay, you mentioned it, and I certainly want to talk about it because the Cowboys have been unafraid to do it before, and they do have a lot of picks in this draft. Now they're all later, but they do have a legit first-round pick. You're picking 12. That's a definite first-round talent player you're getting. What realistic scenarios do you envision that the team would trade back out of 12 to double up at maybe a later first round and a third round?
Yeah, Seattle is the team I'm looking at really closely, and there's a situation where I could foresee happening here. Seattle is picking at 18. They have 2 second-round picks and they have 2 third-round picks. There's a points chart that you can look up. You can Google it. Yeah. NFL trade points chart. If you're not familiar with it, you can look that up. And basically it shows you like a point value for picks and how NFL teams use that to move around in the draft and how it makes, trades fair at the end of the day. If the Cowboys were to take the number 18 pick from Seattle, they could take their number 50 pick in the second round, and it would be an exact points matchup on that chart. It would be an equal balance trade. So in a sense, the Cowboys would parachute 6 spots, go back to 18, and they pick up a second-round pick. If you're looking at the needs on this team, that sounds really enticing. And if there's a guy that's slipping, that's big time, that they could really Seattle's really trying to trade up for, you can maybe even throw in a 4th or a 5th and pick up a day 3 capital value as well. For Seattle, that situation would be if Will Campbell out of LSU is falling. They need an interior lineman. I think Will Campbell plays in the interior at the next level. If you have Will Campbell on the board at 12, or if you have Kelvin Banks on the board at 12, and Seattle is interested in trading up, I think that could be your scenario.
Okay. I wrote down Michigan has 3 players, and I understand mock drafts are not exact science, but there are 3 defensive players that Michigan probably will have picked in the first round. The Cowboys do not have a great history of selecting Michigan players of late. Taco Charlton didn't work out. I would say kindly, that the jury is out on Mozzie Smith.
Jordan Lewis worked out. That's about it.
Yeah, Jordan worked out, and I'm thinking that was 9 years ago. But you're right, and we got to include him. That certainly worked out. And then obviously the tight end. I'm blanking on his name. What was the tight end?
Schoonmaker.
Like Luke Schoonmaker. Thank you very much. That one is iffy. With the fact that they have not had a lot of luck with these players from Michigan of late, especially Mozzie Smith and Taco, would that change their mind in running away from a Marcus Graham or a Will Johnson? Because those are need positions. Would that change their mind saying, you know what? We better not do that one.
I don't think so. If
Why not? Why not?
It's kind of a scouting philosophy in some sense, and it's very well streamlined in NFL circles that you don't scout the helmet. And that is a conversation that gets brought up multiple times when you bring up Michigan and Dallas Cowboys. And here's a reason why in this instance, for example, they draft Taco Charlton, they draft Mozzie Smith, 2 of those guys being on the defensive line. You would say easily those are the 2 biggest quote-unquote Michigan busts so far. Let me not do air quotes. It's a sensitive topic. Yeah. But I think you look at those 2 guys in the system that they played in, and then you compare that system to what the system that Michigan played in this past season. They bring in Wink Martindale, NFL defensive coordinator. He's very aggressive with his interior defensive linemen. He's a big reason why Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, both of those interior defensive linemen who could go in the first round, big reason why they're getting that type of love and praise. It's a completely different system. I think it's a completely different type of situation. If you're sitting there at 44 somehow and Kenneth Grant's on the board, you go get that. I wouldn't be
44.
That's not going to happen, but I'm just saying, like, if Kenneth Grant's there at 44 for you somehow, you go do that. You don't worry about the helmet that he's wearing.
Okay. We do have – this is right up your alley, and you gave me this right down. Pro days are coming up. All right. Thank you, Candy. Pro days are coming up. That means it's these guys' times to shine because the top players don't want to do anything at the combine anymore other than do interviews and maybe do medicals. So where are Cowboys coaches or scouts running around to see prospective draftees?
Yeah, we'll start with defensive coordinator Matt Eberflus. He has he's already been busy. He's hit 3 pro days in the SEC. He went to Tennessee, South Carolina, and Georgia over the course of the last couple of weeks. A lot of big-time defenders at all those schools. We can start with Tennessee. They have a first-round talent in James Pierce, edge rusher. Now, granted, there's been some off-field concerns about James Pierce, so maybe a situation where Eberflus goes and he meets the kid and gets to know him and gets to know him a little bit better. They also have tons of talent on both sides of the ball. You look at Georgia, Jalen Walker, Michael Williams. We've mentioned those guys already. I mean, there's talent deep in that Georgia class. At South Carolina, Eberflus had a meeting with linebacker Demetrius Knight Jr. He's probably a day 2 type talent, so maybe second, third round is a situation where you'd be looking at a prospect like that. But they also have a ton of defensive line talent. Kyle Kennard is a defensive end for them that probably could go late day 2, early day 3. TJ Sanders, one of the best defensive tackles in this class, in my opinion, is another guy that's coming out. And the best name in the entire draft class, you ready for this? Tonka Hemingway, defensive tackle at South Carolina. He's like a late day 3 guy. I just want to throw him in there, though.
I want a Tonka truck, please.
Give me a Tonka in the defensive interior. Are you kidding me? Like, how could that not work? The Oregon Pro Day was also late last week. 3 Dallas assistants were there. Receivers coach Junior Adams. Now, granted, he was a former Oregon coach, obviously came from that Oregon staff, was just hired a couple months ago. Probably there just to support his guys. The only draftable receiver is Tez Johnson, and I don't see the Cowboys taking Tez Johnson in this class. But also defensive line coach Aaron Whitecotton was there. 2 really talented defensive linemen for the Ducks. Jordan Birch, more of an edge type. He's kind of that bigger edge guy that you would put on to to be a guy that can help you in both pass rush and stopping the run, kind of similar to the skill set that DeMarcus Lawrence brought out of Boise State. He'd be a day 2 type talent as well. And then Derek Harmon is a defensive tackle at Oregon, another day 2 type talent that I think is one of the best defensive tackles in this class too. And then offensive line coach Connor Riley was there as well. 2 draftable offensive linemen for the Ducks in my eyes. Josh Connerly Jr., tackle. He's a day 2 talent. And then Ajani Cornelius, late day 2, probably going to end up day 3, offensive tackle as well.
Okay, we talked about this a lot last season. You weren't with, this time a year ago, when you were still with DallasCowboys.com, and I would imagine you had the same conversation that we all did who follow the team, which was they're going to draft a running back.
Yeah.
They had signed Ezekiel Elliott. They really weren't sure about Rico Dowdle and the fact they kind of liked him, and they're going to draft a running back. It's going to be a 3rd or 4th round pick. They're going to draft a running back because they didn't sign anybody in the offseason other than Zeke. This is one time a year. This time a year ago. The draft comes, day 1, day 2, day 3. They don't draft a running back. Okay, now fast forward a year later. You mentioned Ashton Gianti. Let's just assume he's gone at 12, which I think, even though the attitudes about running back in the NFL have evolved and changed, where you don't spend high capital on a running back, he's the exception to the rule. Okay, so he's gone by 12. The Cowboys don't get him. They've got a guy that they like, Javonte Williams, used to be with the Broncos. He basically comes in to replace Rico Dowdle, whatever you think of that move. Please tell me that this time the Cowboys will spend a real draft pick, not a 7, a real draft pick on a running back.
I think.
Oh, boy.
I think you need to mentally prepare for this.
No.
Hold on. Mentally prepare that they could be going into day 3 without a running back. Here's why.
You gotta be kidding.
Here's why. And I'm actually not against it personally.
All right. I'll tell you. Talk me off this ledge, brother.
Javonte Williams is going to be your 3rd down back. He's great in the receiving game, 52 receptions last year, 6th in the NFL among all running backs. He's a great pass protector. He is your 3rd down guy comfortably. You need
so they're going to bring back Zeke. You're going to tell me they're bringing back Zeke.
Exactly. That's it. First, you need a guy who can get you yards on 1st and 2nd down. I think the thing that frustrated fans more than anything, and frustrated people here as well in the Cowboys facility, is you start the game, opening possession, 15 minutes on the clock, and you hand the ball off and it's half a yard, and you expect it. And that's just what you do because you don't have a running game. They need a guy they can hand it to and go get 5-6 yards on the first carry of the game and start this offensive drive off with some momentum. I think they can find that guy on day 3. In this running back class, I think it's the deepest draft at the running back position since 2016. And it's you're going to have talent there on day 3. I did a mock draft yesterday on Star Telegram, a 7-round mock, and there was a guy there for me in the 5th round, Jordan James out of Oregon. You talk about
he's good.
You talk about everything that he is good at. It is exactly what the Cowboys need in that early down back who can get you those yards, who can be productive. He's not the greatest in late down situations. He doesn't have a developer out tree. He's not the best pass protector. You don't need that.
I was just going to say, can he block?
Yeah, you have Javonte Williams. So it works out in a sense.
Wait a minute. Hang on. Time out. So Javonte Williams is a great 3rd down back. If he's a great 3rd down back, that means you're running him out in pass patterns, right?
Yeah, most likely.
And now you're taking the kid from Oregon that you're concerned about in pass protection. How does that fly?
Yeah, and that's going to have to be a question that Brian Schottenheimer would have to answer. And I think it's something that's one of the more fascinating mind games and chess games that offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators play with each other, is when they know you have a 3rd down back, how do you utilize that guy? And do you work him in randomly on 1st downs? And do you work in the Jordan James type guy randomly on 3rd downs, like a 3rd and 3? Here, yeah, we're going to show that we're maybe running the ball here, but we're actually going to pass it. And there's some chess games that you could play with that. The Cowboys have a lot of needs going into this draft. They need to go get a starting corner, in my eyes. They need to go get a starting receiver, in my eyes. And they really need defensive tackle help. If those 3 things are at your availability in the first 2 days of the draft, you got to address them. And if that means waiting till day 3 to go get a running back, then so be it. And I think there's enough talent in this draft class to where you can get a running back in the 5th round. Look, it's not as safe as the 3rd. I'm not saying that, but it's a guy that you can feel comfortable with coming in and competing.
But we've seen historically with NFL rookie running backs, a fifth rounder can get you 1,000 yards. Now, I'm with Troy Aikman on this one. A running back going for 1,000 yards in a 17-game season is not the big a deal that it used to be. It's just not. The numbers bear it out. But
1,200 is more so the echelon in my eyes.
I agree with that. That's kind of the number. But you can have a guy, whether he's a fifth-round pick, you've seen fifth-rounders, you've seen undrafted guys step into pretty good offenses and have very productive seasons as rookies or second or third-year players. I'm not really that concerned about that part of it. The part that concerns me is, do they put the necessary evaluation on pass protection for their quarterback? We have seen the quarterback now develop into a guy who gets hurt. He just does. It doesn't mean he's a bad guy or even a bad quarterback, but he gets hurt, and hurt guys get hurt. And to me, that is my bigger concern is, do you have somebody? You could trust Rico Dowdle on pass protection. He's pretty good. He was willing. He put his nose in there. He wasn't like Zeke. Zeke was all world
generational. Yeah.
He was great. He was like having a guard back there or a tight end. But to me, it's like, you better have a plan. You better have a guy that you can trust, you can put in there next to your quarterback, that when they're coming, he knows what to do. Because if not, number 4 is going to get blown up back to, the Stone Ages. And I just don't see how they can afford that, which leads me to this next part. QB2. Yeah. Because they better have somebody. And clearly, whatever you thought about Cooper Rush, the guy was a pro. And all credit to Cooper Rush. I couldn't have been more wrong on a guy. Cooper Rush did it, and he got a 2-year deal with Baltimore to sit behind Lamar Jackson. Great. God, good for him. All right. Who is it?
Yeah.
It ain't Trey Lance, so who is it?
Yeah, and it's not going to be a veteran. They're going to have to go and grab a rookie in this class. And the question is, if you acquire another third-round pick, do you go get a guy like Quinn Ewers? Quinn Ewers is a guy that the Cowboys have been doing a lot of homework on. Mike McCarthy has actually been training him during this draft process at Plano Senior High School. So that's been a fascinating aspect of that whole ordeal. But they had a meeting with him at the Combine. It was an informal meeting, but it was extensive, and they got a good feel of each other. And there are Cowboys personnel at Texas's pro day today, seeing Quinn throw. I think if it's a situation where he's available to them late in the third and they had that extra third-round pick, it wouldn't surprise me if they pull the trigger on a guy like Quinn Ewers. Quinn Ewers would be a name I would say to keep an eye on as far as being attached to the Cowboys. Another one, Will Howard out of Ohio State. I think if that's a guy who slips to the 5th round and is available to them, I think they would take a guy like that.
Okay, last thing I'm going to talk to you here on Cowboys Overtime, and that is, what do you like that they have done starting in the offseason when Mike McCarthy, basically when the Cowboys and Mike McCarthy decided to go their separate ways? What do you like that they've done, and what do you dislike that they have done so far? I've got some ideas too.
I like the staff that they put together, and I like that they allowed Bryden Schottenheimer to really put his teeth into getting that staff complete. You look at college experience that they've been bringing in, college philosophy, and guys like Junior Adams, wide receivers coach from Oregon, Connor Riley, offensive line coach from Kansas State. Getting that type of blood, especially on the offensive side of the ball, super valuable. I love the offensive coordinator hire and Clayton Adams. I think that's going to be very important to what they try to do in the run game. Back to the conversation kind of about when do they draft a running back, they've invested so much into the running game and having an offensive coordinator like Clayton Adams, and they want to be able to assure that there's going to be protection up front for that running game. Who's to say that they don't get a running back in the 2nd round? If a guy like, Quinshon Judkins or Travion Henderson is there, I would say you do take him. But that's what I've liked. The staff that they've put together, I think, has been pretty complete. I think there's only a couple of staffers that I would look at and be like, yeah, we'll see how that works out. But the rest of them, I would give more than positive grades. What I have disliked, I wish there would have been a little bit more urgency at the cornerback position. And I think that's going to end up biting them this next
year. You think Trayvon Diggs is done, don't you?
I don't think he's done, but I think you need to prepare for the fact that he might be.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's
not done in the sense that he's never going to play again. Done in the sense that he's never going to be back to the same level that he was at pre-injuries, now plural. His rehab's been going well. He's already onto balance and moving training exercises, which is ahead of schedule for that type of injury. Is he back by week 1? That's the question. And if he's not, what the hell does your starting cornerback situation
There's
look
no way he's going to be back by week 1, Nick.
You have Deron Bland, who is a safe starter.
That's legit. Wait, hang on. How is it plausible that he's going to be back by week 1?
It's a potential. It wasn't an ACL injury. It wasn't a tendon injury. It was more so like a cleanup that, kind of incorporated a little bit more than an average cleanup surgery.
All right.
And we'll see. He's expected to miss the majority, if not all, of training camp. If you're asking me, he probably gets put on the PUP to start the season, misses 4 games, and then he starts getting worked back in probably week 5. That would be my prediction. But I think you need to prepare for the sense that it could be half the season. And when he does come back, he doesn't come back to full speed. Those are just the things you have to prepare for in the league, especially when you're paying him $100 million. You have to prepare for the fact that it might not work out, because if it doesn't, then you're up a creek. Deron Bland is a safe outside corner. You can throw that and be comfortable with it. Who's your nickel? Who's your other outside corner? Kalen Carson. Do you feel comfortable throwing him back in the situation? I mean, yeah, he was up and down.
No.
I don't either. I don't either. You need to go get a corner on day 2 that can start, in my opinion. If not day 1, if it falls to them right, a guy like Will Johnson, who's to say that doesn't work out for them. But a day 2 guy for sure. There's a guy in Trey Amos, corner out of Ole Miss. I like him. If they got Maxwell Hairston out of Kentucky, I think that would be one of the best picks they could possibly make in this draft. If he's there for them at 44, I am making a scene with how fast I'm running to turn that card in. He's a guy that can start for you at nickel or at outside corner. 4.27 740. He was the fastest player of all defensive players at the combine and the 40-yard dash. He's a guy I would run to the table to draft, but I don't like the urgency that they have, or lack of urgency that they dealt with at the cornerback position. Also, another sense is these contract extensions. Yes, you got to get Micah Parsons done. Don't get me wrong. You got to get Micah Parsons done, and you have to understand what that number looks like before you can start moving on to other guys. But there might come a point in the Micah Parsons negotiations where you have to start moving on to other guys. After next season, Deron Bland is going to be a free agent. Jake Ferguson is going to be a free agent.
He was a 4-year guy. That's right.
Jake Ferguson is going to be a free agent. Sam Williams is going to be a free agent. Who's to say he doesn't? I
forgot he was on the team. And I'm not kidding.
Come back, and has an awesome year next year. And then it is what it is. They probably wouldn't do an extension with him. That's a bad example. But Brandon.
Oh, wait a minute. Hang on. Time out. If Sam Williams goes out, this was a first-round talented player who, because of off-season concerns, dropped to the second. The Cowboys looked the other way on any number of offenses. He comes here. He shows some talent, but he also shows a lot of stupid. He's ACL. He's out for the season in 24. Now he comes back in 25. Let's just play this out. If he has a monster year, we've seen it before. You think he's gone? You don't think they give him a deal?
Well, a monster year in my eyes is like 13 sacks, and then that would be a $80-90 million contract for him. Maybe you could push that. You could push that pretty high, and I don't see them being able to do that. But let's look at it from this sense. Let's say they do extend him right now, and they give him, let's say, a 3-year, $30 million contract.
You're talking today.
Maybe that's too much. Yeah, I'm saying today. But let's go 3 years, $20 million. That's around the deal that Chauncey Golston got. So let's say he gets that type of deal. And then he goes out next year and tears his ACL again. He comes back the next year, gets like 2 sacks, and then you're wasting money. So Sam Williams is a bad example. I think you let him play out his deal, and you take your wins where you can get them. And maybe that's a situation where you give him a limited amount of snaps for a reason. That's certainly been done by other franchises, and it can certainly work for you. Brandon Aubrey is another one. He's going to be a free agent after next season. God. That's going to be a monster contract. I know it's a kicker.
It'll be the highest contract.
It's going to be the highest paid kicker of all time. And do you want that? Do you want a potential of I'm trying to think of kickers that are going to be due up. Jake Elliott, do you want him to be able to push the market? Do you want a guy like Daniel Carlson to be able to push the market? I'm just kind of throwing kicker names out there. Yeah. Or would you rather get ahead of that? So I understand you have to know what the Micah number looks like before you can really start pivoting to those other conversations. But the one I really look at is Deron Bland, because if he goes out and he has an awesome year next year, and you can't afford to keep him, and then you're left with a hurt Trayvon Diggs and nothing else behind that. So that's the one I look at.
You mentioned a lot of things about the staff. I really like the fact that they hired Matt Eberflus. I was a fan of his because of, I talked to him a few times when he was with the Cowboys under Jason Garrett. And, you know, of the Jason Garrett coaching tree, which was about yay big, Matt's the only one to go out and get a head coaching job. Yeah. And I understand it didn't work out for him. But I think he's a really solid professional coach. I think some of those other guys you brought in, like you mentioned, it'll be interesting to see how Brian sort of molds into this role. However you think he got it, he's the head coach. I really like the fact that they did acknowledge they couldn't lose Osa Odighizuwa. There's a risk involved. I think Osa left money on the table by staying with the Cowboys rather than going to free agency. Yeah. But they know him. They like him. They did acknowledge, like, look, we can't let all of these guys go. We got to keep somebody. And I like the fact that I would like to, selfishly, because I liked DeMarcus Lawrence, I understood the football decision in it. And I'm happy he got his contract. I think letting Jordan Lewis go was a big risk. And I understand the money he got may not have been what they anticipated. But I think the part that really bugs me about this is that we've seen time and again, the Cowboys' offseason philosophy puts too much pressure on Will McClay and the scouting staff not to miss. And they go out and you don't – I understand they don't want to go out and reset the market in free agency. I get that. But it puts too much pressure on them not to miss, to have too high of a batting average in the draft. Because if you miss just a little, and you can look back at these last couple classes and say – I don't know about that one because they've missed on Mozzie Smith. Mm-hmm. I know he had a great game against the Giants, and he has shown flashes here and there, but they missed on – that's a miss.
He's not a first-round pick.
No way. No, that's a miss. And now you're like, okay, well, now what are we going to do? Well, sometimes you have to go in and correct your mistakes in the draft and free agency, and I know they don't want to do it. And I get why. But sometimes you've got to. And then the other one, you mentioned it. I'm glad you brought it up. I see just this Micah Parsons deal being some kind of repeat of the CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott thing where they're out fishing. I'm not talking about CD or Dak. It's going to be the Cowboys front office staff is out there sitting fishing on a boat, enjoying the offseason and their money. Good on them. And meanwhile, Mike is just sitting there and the price tag's going up. And it's going to get harder and harder for your cap situation, which is the reason why you can't do anything. Because whoever is in charge of it doesn't know how to manage it as well as it needs to be. And that's the part that I keep looking at, like, why? He wants to be here. He's going to be here. You know what the number is. Just do it now. And clearly I'm yelling at the wind, and the wind is going to win. And that's the part, I still think the Cowboys could be pretty good. They could be, 9, 10, win, 11. They're not any closer to Philadelphia or Kansas City today than they were 3 or 4 months ago when the season ended. But that's the part. I was like, I don't see any shift in philosophy, even though you've identified this to be a problem. But you don't do anything about it because you're out having fun on a boat. And
I'm predicting here that the Micah Parsons deal does not play out how CD and Dak does.
So you think it'll be done July?
I think it could be done even sooner. I'd say at the worst, right before training camp. At best, right before the draft. I mean, they have.
Oh, really? You think it could be done next month?
They have had extensive negotiations already, and they have gotten into the nitty gritty already. They are much further along right now than Dak and CD were around this time last year. Granted, David Mulugeta is Michael Parsons' agent. He's going to get every dime that he possibly can. And the waiting game is not on the Cowboys this time around. And I will say it wasn't on them with the Dak deal last year either. I think CD it was. But I think this is more so the market trying to play out, see if any other dominoes fall. Max Crosby has fallen. Myles Garrett has fallen. What do those dominoes look like whenever Micah Parsons' deal gets done? And then how does his deal get structured? And I think those are the things that they work out in these kinds of conversations. But I think at best it could happen before the draft. At worst, I think it happens right before training camp. I don't think we go into training camp with a holdout.
All right, Nick, I've taken way too much time, but I love talking football with you.
It was great.
Yeah, it really was fun. All right, for all of your Cowboys coverage needs, and the fact that this guy did a 7-round mock draft, you owe yourself to go check that thing out. I'll be fascinated to see your batting average on that one. Anybody who does that, I have great respect for, because that takes a lot of time and homework.
I will throw a caveat in. This specific one that I did yesterday was I was like, I want to do a couple of nightmare scenarios, quote unquote. How can it still play out positively? I'm gonna drop an official. I think this is what happens. 7-round mock the day before the draft. So.
The day before the draft. All right. Well, we should do we have to do like a checkup on it. So if you post it on a Wednesday, we got to see how it plays out on Monday. But whatever you did, you get an A+ for it. All right. For all your Cowboys coverage needs, be sure to check out Nick on StarTelegram.com. Thank you, Candy Bolden, our fearless producer, for staying awake. Be sure to check us out in the future for more episodes of a new and improved Cowboys Overtime here on StarTelegram.com. Check with you later.